In today's episode of Park Spotlight, we are pushing the boundaries of the PlayStation 5. That is right, this is a showcase of what you could do on a console when you push it to its absolute limit. For those unaware, there is a memory limit on the PlayStation 5, and I believe today's creator has pushed it to that very maximum. So I am very curious to see what is possible on a console, support the console community, and so that's exactly what we're doing here today. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a closer look at Icon Park. Hey yo, my Rollercoaster friends, Johnny5 Alive here, and welcome back to another episode of Park Spotlight. Today we're going to be looking at Icon Park by Big 14 Fins, an unranked and now builder in this community, as well as a bronze patron. Thank you so much for your support, and here they say, hey there, been working hard on this on the PS5, so I can't do as much without it looking like I did too little. So I hope you enjoy. I had a fun time on this one. I'm at the 99.8% and it wouldn't let me get to 100 in order to upload. Wow, so they absolutely pushed the PlayStation 5 limits to the maximum to a point where they couldn't even place another tree. Wow. PS, I've been watching you for years now, and it's about time I can join in on the fun. Looking forward to the contest. Oh, the contest. Big 14 Fins. Were they in the contest? Let me quickly check. Their name is not coming up in the console submission form. Aw, we had 12 or so console members compete in the Flume contest, so hopefully Big 14 Fins, you compete in the next one, because our contests don't require you to push the PlayStation to 99.8%. All right, with all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's go check out this console creator's theme park. Let's go! Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Icon Park. Hope everybody is having an absolutely fantastic day. Look at all these cool builds. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how big of a park you can get. As mentioned, 99.8% of the memory limit on the PlayStation 5 has been used. However, the discussion and the feedback then becomes how efficiently was it used, right? How can you find ways to improve? This will be an interesting experiment discussion to see, you know, what maybe you could have gotten rid of or amplified more, or how maybe you could have condensed it a little bit more. I definitely noticed there's a lot of trees. I don't know how much memory trees require, but you know, I still think there's a lot going on in this park, as you would have saw from the B-roll. Plenty of flat rides, flumes, coasters. Wow, look at this. We got the Mad Max soda bus. I actually really like this build. That's super cool. I love all these little truck shops. Maybe we got to do a little truck shop contest or challenge. Thinking about introducing challenges to Discord soon. Oh, look at that. I like the little emblems on the benches there. That's fun. Yeah, so I mean, you definitely have a lot of facilities. And normally I would say you could punch up the details a little bit, but the more you add, the more you hit that memory limit. So there's gonna be a less is more type situation on a lot of these things. Oh, wait for me. Little flumes. Whee! And look at that. We have a whole wave pool and water park back there. That is phenomenal. Woo! All right. These are fun little flumes. Now, one thing, we're gonna need like a console QA tester, somebody that kind of breaks down the cost, the memory cost of various like pieces and stuff. Because every time you add a track to a coaster, does that increase the memory limit? I would imagine it does, but to what extent, right? That being said, is a dozen or so trees or a forest more expensive than a coaster? How many you know what, this is what I'm kind of getting at. Like, if you can build a coaster for only 2% of the memory limit, you could make a Six Flags park on a console and get like 20 coasters, but the theming in between is certainly going to lack. And I think that's going to be interesting to see how the console members sort of adapt to the memory limit, picking and choosing their battles on where they want to spend the pieces, right? Like, how much memory did this pool cost, right? If there are things that are cheaper than others, it's good to know what they are and why, and how we can, you know, spam certain things and get away with a lot more. There's also a trick. There is a trick where you can use a rotator to basically rotate a lot of pieces and create symmetry. I'll have to show that off in a separate video. I'm sure there's some tutorials out there, but that may not go against the memory limit of a PlayStation, which means you could kind of use that as a way to get additional pieces. So that's also something we can definitely try to help the console players get more bang for their buck. All right, now great little water park so far. Great little builds as well. Everyone getting some shade, but not really quite getting some shade. Very nice. All right, let's go check out some coasters and see how our console creator, how they succeeded at the smoothing tools for. Oh, did I miss these flumes? Darn it. We could pass on that one. Spinny, 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 round, round, round we go. I want to go to roller coaster, and we got a launch coaster right here. That looks like an exit, but you never know. Oh, this is probably the queue. Here we go. No one's going on this coaster. What's going on over here? They like the water park. All right, what are we dealing with here? This is Ride Fins Up. Our creator is 14 fins here today. Here's a look at the test results. Very good, actually. Almost a kilometer, over a kilometer in length, 99 kilometers per hour. And I think we're standing up on this one. We are. Very cool. Couple things that are really nice is multiple block sections to have 2 coasters running on this at all times. Pretty good environment. We got some splashdown effects, although I think they could have been triggered slightly better because you don't really see them unless we were doing a very, very far back chase view. So it could trigger those a little bit early, but attempting to do them on a console is definitely challenging as well. So again, it comes down to the discussion of what do you improve and why. I'm not entirely sure. I think in this case, for your boarding station, it's not the prettiest looking boarding station, and what might have actually done better for 400 pieces is doing something a little bit more like a Tiki Cabana thing. Even something like this, like your hangar bay style boarding station, looks pretty good for its cost of only 100 pieces. So I definitely think you could refine that, cut back some pieces, but then focus more on that tropical theming, and you could probably squeeze out a lot more with that. But pretty solid creation and coaster layout on that overall. All right, I think that's gonna pretty much do it for the back half of the park over here. We're gonna head back into the main area of the park. I think we have a little bit of a detour back here. Nope, that's staff facilities. All right, let's just go to the other side of the park then. Okay, here we go. Restrooms, Ring of Fire, some more shops and facilities, looking good. Very nice. We got a big wooden coaster on the right here. Upside down signs. Thanks for the update, Frontier. And an invert. Very cool. Let's Well, you got a lot of facilities in this park, I will say. That looks pretty good. Bathroom designs are pretty spot on too. Even lockers, although I do believe these lockers are expensive. I know you downloaded these from the workshop. I've seen them several times. You know, each one of these numbers and fonts, it's a lot of pieces. It adds up really, really quickly. So on a console, I would probably forego using those in the future. Pretty expensive. All right, Bigfoot. Good old wooden coaster. Some good ambience through this park too. I've noticed you've placed speakers throughout. Very nice to see. Taking your time to just make sure everything has a good vibe. And the Bigfoot. Love to see it. All right. Let's check it out. Finding Bigfoot. Here's a look at the test results if you'd like to see them. 4 seconds of airtime. 7 airtime counts. 16,000 scenery rating. Pretty good. Another long one as well. All right. I think for this one, I want to ride at the back. Let's go. Why do I feel like I've seen this room before? I am getting deja. I definitely have seen this room before. Wait a second. Big 14 Fins, did you submit this coaster for Coaster Spotlight maybe? Potentially that's what's going on here, because I definitely recognize that room. Interesting. I was gonna say, I think the wooden coaster feels very fun at first, but we need a little bit more uppy downy and turning inward. The second half of the coaster is pretty much one note, right? We're just turning left and right, left and right, left and right, all at kind of like one level. And I think it's a good opportunity to go up and down, use that momentum a little bit more, and use that space a bit better. I like what you have started here, and I would have just continued to do that throughout this forest. But pretty solid overall. And I definitely feel like I've ridden that coaster before or seen aspects of it. Maybe that boarding station you downloaded it and somebody shared it. I don't know. No, Finding Bigfoot. I recognize the sign as well. And wait a second. You know what? I think we did a Coaster Spotlight bundle. It was all like wooden coasters or something. And I said there was something strange about the pathwork, as if it got ripped out of a park. And I remember seeing some of these facilities, but not fully completed. We definitely featured that. 100% confirmed. I remember it now. All right, so you got a double feature there. I don't mind the idea of people building like parks, and then as they're building it, they're really proud of one of their coasters and send them in for Coaster Spotlight, right? It's a good idea for sure. All right. Moving on. More shops and facilities. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Well, you know, you definitely have a lot of amenities in your park, and that's definitely a good thing. I'm just trying to tally up all the pieces in my head. What can we cut and what can we add? But so far, as an experience, as a theme park, it's pretty balanced, right? A good amount of shops, some flat rides, duck, and a good amount of coasters so far. So if I don't think we need to trim back the shops at all, if there is no, you know, unless there's a lack of something, right? And as far as I can see so far, we're not really lacking anything, but we can kind of assess it all at the end of the video. So we got an inverted coaster here, 5 inversions on this guy. We're gonna do seat view. Let's go. I just realized I had my mic muted. I wonder how long that's been. Uh-oh. Junior Dragon, there's a look at all the stats if you want to see them. 32,000 scenery rating. Let's go. Watch out for the rock! Fun little Junior. Is it getting stuck here? Ah. I don't know. I had my mic muted, but initially the coaster was not getting up the lift, and that's because the lift counts as a block section in Planet Coaster 2 and 1. Basically, a coaster has to enter the station before another can leave the lift, and you do have 2 trains running on this at all times. So one couldn't quite make it over. Now, I do think that they removed the coaster. Oh, no, the friction settings are set to 1, and I have them enabled. So either you didn't test your coaster settings or the friction update, I don't know, something might have bugged it out, potentially. But the friction settings are set to normal. That being said, we have another big coaster here. Where is our queue? Our queue takes us over through here. We got some epic music on this one, or at least speakers for the station. All right, so what are we looking at here? It's the Soda Lightful Racers, going with the Soda Lightful theme. I kind of like it. And here's a look at the test results. I think this is the longest track in the park at 1.2 kilometers nearly, and 120 kilometers per hour is the fastest speeds on this. Very, very cool. I think we'll do a track view for this one. A front bumper. All right, very cool. Definitely delivered the biggest coaster in the park. And one thing I will mention here, coaster discussion aside, is the scenery brush tool. I believe you are using that. And just an FYI, when you're using that scenery brush tool, which is this, definitely useful for the console builders. There is a line to surface. If you turn that on, what happens is when you find a hill, it tends to cause it to float, right? And we saw a lot of floating rocks and stuff. So I believe you want to turn align to surface off, because then it won't, it'll put them inside the ground rather than on top. And then that way you get more of like it places it kind of halfway through rather than right on top, pixel perfect. And it helps you avoid those floating rocks. This tool in particular is super useful for console builders, but excessive use of it will not only eat up your memory limit, but kind of detracts from what pieces you have available to be creative with. So I would definitely use it in moderation. So I believe we've hit up, oh, we have a river rapids. So I wanted to continue that discussion onwards, but I guess we could check out the river rapids here. Let's do that real quick. All right, this one is just leaving the station now. So where was my train of thought? The scenery brush tool, using it in moderation to save on pieces and to not hinder yourself on your part limit is definitely something to consider with the console, but I think it's going to come down to your overall layout, right? One thing I noticed with this park in particular is how vast of a forest it is. The more you stretch your park out, and I guess you'll notice that more as we look at it from a bird's eye view. We stretch it all the way back there to the water park, right? And then all the way back here. And the actual plaza for the park is somewhere in between. That being said, if you would have brought that side closer to the entrance and the other side closer to the entrance, you would need a lot less trees and rocks to fill out your park. And that alone is probably eating up a good 15-20% of your part limit, which could be converted to an extra 2 or 3 coasters, right? One thing I would also like to test, I don't know this unless I got on a console, but does moving terrain around eat into the scenery limit or the memory limit of a PlayStation that much? I would imagine you could do a lot of terraforming and moving of the terrain for very cheap in terms of memory budget. However, what you've done here for the river rapids is a lot of rocks, which is a lot of pieces, which is a lot of memory. I'm going to assume this is like almost 1,000, right? So to bring it back around is, I think if you did all of this with the terrain tool, not only could you make a more impressive river rapids that takes you through the mountains and through waterfalls and cave systems, it would be less repetitive as well because you're not spamming the same rocks, which also manually placing these rocks one by one with a controller must have been pretty painful, whereas using the terrain tool is a little bit more freeform and easy to do. So it's going to be easier for you to accomplish, cheaper for you to accomplish, and probably result in a slightly more captivating river rapids experience, if that makes sense. And that the amount of pieces that it frees you up could again potentially get you another coaster or two. So some things to think about there, and it's going to be really interesting going forward when our creators are learning these things, right? Like, I'm going to assume that our creator here, Big 14 Fins, started building this park, right? Worked their way out. Maybe they started to the left here, built this whole water park, added in this tropical coaster, built all this and said, okay, I'm going to go to this side now. You probably had intentions to build all the way out here and then realize, hey, I ran out of budget, right? So as a result, you get this kind of weird shaped L where the park is over here and then the other half is over there. And it's not really like compact and condensed. So now after you've built this, you kind of have a feeling of like, okay, this is where the memory budget is. How many shops can I get in? How many rides? You get a sense of that. All that being said, I would, like I mentioned, compressing that footprint of the park into more centralized. You're going to need less pieces to fill out all the background scenery, which you have a lot of trees and rocks on the outsides. Having that condensed more in the center, you're naturally filling so like this here works as a backdrop for the scenery of this over here. So the more you have in one area, the less you need to fill out the background. And in fact, you don't really need to have all these trees surrounding the park, right? The actual sandbox itself is sufficient enough to be fine. Like, I don't think it's necessary to feel the need to cover all that up, right? Especially knowing that you're on console. It's going to eat into your park count. So the limits, I think the actual limits are pretty good on a PlayStation 5. If you think about what we did for like the mini park contest, we had like a border that was like this big that we said you could not build outside of, and people were building phenomenal theme parks with, I think, 2 to 3 coasters. This actually has more stuff in it than the mini park contest 2, I think. That being said, if you compress everything, you can spend more time detailing your builds, have a slightly more detailed park, but less of a sprawling one. So it's definitely going to be a balancing act going forward. And if you guys play on console and you've made a mega park and you've hit that 99.5% threshold like our creator has here today, please do send in your creations, because I want to see like the variations of console creations and how much you can get away with based off of kind of like this jigsaw puzzle of determining like where you pick and choose your battles. But I think our creator here did a pretty good job. We came out with like 4 or 5 different coasters, water parks, Themepark, some Flumes, a lot of shops and facilities. Pretty good overall, I would say. This is definitely a sufficient amount of pieces to make a full-fledged park on a PlayStation. Now, I am a little bit confused why they don't increase that memory limit, because on my end on a PC, I am getting 134 frames per second. The game's running smoothly, and I'm sure even if you're capped at 60 FPS on a PlayStation with the hardware that's on that, it's a very strong console. It's very good hardware. I would imagine that you could really double the amount of part count and memory on a PlayStation before it starts to bog down or drop in frames. So I definitely feel like Frontier could increase the budget on the platforms, in my opinion, but it's hard to say. So if Big 14 Fins could let us know down in the comments how it's running on their PlayStation, how many frames they're getting, be very interesting to know. So fun thought experiment here today. I love to see the console creators setting in their parks, so trying to represent and support the console creators, and as well Big 14 Fins supporting the show through Patreon. So thank you so much for that, Big 14 Fins. And what did you guys think of today's creation? Fire away down in the comments below, and that is going to do it in today's episode of Park Spotlight. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.